The client in that case can work with and partner with an executive coach in a way that they often are not able to do with their direct manager. And it also creates a little bit of a different space, sometimes even a safer space, to say things that they just maybe don't want to say to their manager directly for one reason or another.
Well, welcome to today's chat. Eric, what is our topic for today?
Today we're going to just talk about coaching. We're going to talk about what coaching is, a little bit about what it is not, and hopefully bring some new information, maybe even some clarity to folks.
I know that in recent months I have learned a lot about what coaching is and what it is not. I have also learned that I had some misconceptions and misunderstandings. So I'm excited to chat through this with you today. I think it's an opportunity for people to learn more about what it is or isn't if they're curious. With that being said, we have a few questions we want to dive into today for all those curious minds out there. So the first one is, how can we define executive coaching?
You know, the simple way that I like to describe it and think of it is that it is a method by which we are able to tap into our own resources and kind of figure out what's between us today and where we're trying to go. And sometimes we need a partner in crime for that type of work, and that's where a coach comes in. The term you used, executive coaching, is actually just a type of coaching. There are lots of coaches out there that do different things. There's terms like business coach, life coach, executive coach. There's just so many types of coaches. And so in particular, we're going to talk about executive coaching, which often has to do with self-development skills, leadership skills. Sometimes it does tap into business concepts and business needs, but it is all about the individual, not so much about the business as an entity. And the coach's role is to help the client understand what is in the way between where they are and where they're trying to go, what's in their control, what can they do about it, and in many cases, to help the client realize and commit to some type of personal action. An executive coach is not in the driver's seat necessarily. It's more of a partnership to have conversation, to think out loud together, and the client is the one who's really driving where things go, because it's the client's desires that are actually more important than the coach's, let's say, experience. And so that's one reason that sometimes it's actually helpful to include a definition of what it's not while you're defining what it is.
Okay, funny way to put it, but I do think it's helpful if we get into the details here. So what would you say that executive coaching is not? Because I think sometimes people assume it's one thing, and then when you get into it, you realize, oh, that's not actually what this is. So what is it not?
Yeah, and the reason, it's a word that is used in lots of ways, lots of places, the word coach, and so it's really helpful to really draw this distinction. There are four main areas that get a little confused with coaching that I think are helpful to walk through. So the first is going to be managing. What is it that your manager on your team might do that is different from what you might experience with a coach? Mentorship is another one that can get confused. And then there's consulting that sometimes gets a little confused with coaching, and then also even counseling. So those are the four areas that are the most common that we like to kind of draw distinctions between.
Nice. Okay, so let's dive into the managing piece. Tell me a little bit about what managing is and how that's not quite executive coaching. What are the differences there?
Yeah, it's a great place to start, in particular because there can be some overlap. If we think about a Venn diagram, a manager can coach a team member on their team, but it's not where the relationship stops. A manager also must hold that person accountable. Sometimes that involves hiring and promotion and demotion and firing decisions. The manager is going to be aware of a lot of the minutia of a team member's job duties and projects, whereas a coach is actually coming in intentionally as an outside party, somebody who's not as familiar with all the minutia of the work. And that becomes a really valuable perspective to then bring questions to someone. So the client in that case can work with and partner with an executive coach in a way that they often are not able to do with their direct manager. And it also creates a little bit of a different space, sometimes even a safer space, to say things that they just maybe don't want to say to their manager directly for one reason or another. So an executive coach is different from a manager's duties in that they are that outside voice. Even though a manager can use coaching techniques in their leadership, there are just some things that they can't do by nature of the relationship inside of an organization.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the next one on the list is mentoring. How is it different to be mentored by someone versus being coached by someone? What does that look like?
Yes. So mentorship in so many cases and ways has to do with the mentor's past experiences, the mentor's knowledge, the mentor's skill sets in some cases, and the mentee in that instance is going to benefit from that mentor sharing about their past and experiences, and often sharing wisdom and ideas, perhaps advice, and sometimes questions to help the other person, the mentee, think about what they should do in a certain circumstance, whether it's a career change, whether it's a challenge in their existing role. They're getting expertise and advice based on somebody else's past experiences. Coaching is really not like that at all. What we do as coaches is focus on the people in general, the development of them, and their unique path, which is not always the same as our path. You know, a mentor in some cases even guides you towards the path they've walked because they know it well. And that's not the intention or the role of a coach. A coach is going to be more interested in helping somebody find their own unique path, the one that perhaps is meant for them. And it might be quite different from the one that the coach has taken. So a coach's job is not really to tell you what they've done. It's not really to tell you what their experience was. Sometimes that can get introduced into a conversation, but it's never intended to be prescriptive to where it's the coach is telling the client, you should try X, Y, and Z because I tried X, Y, and Z, and this is what I experienced. So that's one of the biggest distinctions between coaching and mentoring, in that the coach is not trying to draw from their experience and point you in that particular type of direction.
Got it. Okay. Well, my assumption would be that there are some interesting nuances between mentoring versus consulting, because you're still building off of knowledge that you have gained through experience, right? So if we move into that consulting piece, what's the difference between consulting and coaching someone, and how, stemming from that mentorship piece, there's still going to be some differences there. So explain that one.
Yeah, the way I like to think of this is the distinction is on who is responsible for the outcomes and who is contributing to the outcomes. In a coaching situation, we're going to help clients focus on, again, walking their unique path to success. And as the client, they're responsible for the results that they receive from coaching, from conversations, from commitments that are made. And the coach is going to help the client become more of who it is that they want to be and to achieve those results on their own. A consultant, on the other hand, is actually stepping into almost a project, and they're going to take responsibility for some of the outcomes. In some cases, they're going to take responsibility for most of the outcomes. A consultant might say, I've built a business. I will now help you build your business. By guiding you, telling you what to do, I will actually make some of the progress on your behalf. I'll be really involved in the outcomes. A coach is not going to actually cause those outcomes. The coach's role is to actually help you unearth those things for yourself and equip you to go do those, because the coach, if they just did the work, that actually undercuts the value of coaching. So that's the main way to think of the distinction there.
Got it. Okay. Well, the last one that you mentioned earlier was counseling. So how would you explain the differences between receiving counseling from someone versus, again, the coaching piece?
Yeah, this is a really valuable distinction, and a lot of coaches take time to clarify the difference, because coaching sessions can start to feel like they're counseling or even therapeutic, especially if somebody's not too familiar with going to counseling or therapy. A simple way to think about the differences here is that coaching is thinking about where you are today and where you want to go. Counseling often talks about where you are today, how'd you get here? Why did you get here? What's underneath that? And so when we think about the role of a coach, we are happy to acknowledge some of the things that are relevant, but we're not trying to dig into and define and understand the past. We're ultimately thinking about what's in between today where I am and where I want to be. What's in between where the client is today, where the client wants to be. And it's not uncommon for a coach to occasionally pause and say, this is valuable, but this is also really valuable. Do you have someone that you can actually take this part to? And essentially recommending that somebody pursue a counseling or therapeutic relationship if that would be of interest. But it's territory that is not one for a coach to navigate, strictly as an executive coach.
Right. Yes. You know, as I told my daughter when she wanted to cut her own hair, I said, do you have a license for that? You know, there are some things that maybe we need some extra qualifications to help people navigate. It was such a light bulb when I heard that comparison of how with counseling, we're going to focus on the past.
Yeah.
And with coaching, we're going to focus on the future.
Yeah.
Such a simple distinction, but a very clear one that can help you decide which one is the best avenue for you, depending on what you're in need of.
You know, one thing I just remembered is a way to think of this. When you consider your past, if it feels like an issue, then there is some opportunity for counseling, some therapy, some counseling. If it feels more like a fact than an issue, then that's just like, run with the coaching for sure. And you can do both if you want, for what it's worth. People can pursue both at the same time. But if you think about the past and it feels more like an issue than a fact, then that's more counseling territory.
Right. Yeah. Well, another common question that I think people have when they're curious about coaching, they want to know, what does this look like? What is the process? How do you approach it? And I'm sure it's a little different for each coach that you may work with. But in your experience, how would you describe the process to someone who's curious about it?
Yeah, it's a wonderful process. I've been a coach and have been coached, and I've had multiple coaches. So I can share sort of some commonalities. Of course, this is not going to cover every base that somebody might encounter when pursuing or working with a coach. But in terms of the process and the experience, it's pretty common that when you begin coaching, you're probably going to encounter some type of like intake questionnaire, some type of survey, maybe even an assessment or two to get a sense of your personality style, your working style. Maybe you're taking something like DISC or the Colby, Working Genius. There are just so many tools that can help you unearth things about yourself. And then a lot of coaches and organizations that provide coaching have their own kind of homegrown intake assessment as well, where they're going to ask you questions about where you are, where you want to be, and that can actually be a super helpful way for both the coach and the client to figure out what's a good place to start together. Because again, this whole endeavor is about getting where you want to go and knowing that I could probably use some help along the way. So the intake process is something that you can expect with just about any coach, some type of process there. Once you've done that, you typically have sort of a kickoff call where you get into the answers that you've provided and really decide what's most important right now. Where do I feel like I want help or need help the most right now? What's most important to me right now? And a coach is going to use questions to really help understand that for them as the coach, but at the same time, you're probably learning it you're on your own. You're figuring some of it out for yourself because you haven't peeled back the layers quite as much as the coach probably will invite you to. Were you about to jump in?
I was going to say, just because I think for a lot of people, one roadblock for them might be that they think they have to know before they go into their first session what specifically they want to work on or what they think their roadblocks are, this sort of thing. And so I think it's really important that you just pointed out that you don't have to come in with all the answers. The coach will ask very intentional questions to help you get to the point where you do have a clearer vision. So if you're at a point of frustration or feeling like things are cloudy and you don't have clarity on what your next step should be, that's okay, because that's part of the gift of the coach, they're going to help you unearth that.
That's right.
So I just want to
Yeah.
slow down and point that out because I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the quality of your answers are related to the quality of the questions. And some of us have questions that we don't have answers to, but then if we just have a conversation with a coach, they'll have a different spin on probably a similar question, and then they'll have a
Mm-hmm.
whole catalog of different questions we've never thought to ask ourselves that help unearth really high quality answers for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. So you don't have to come in with all the answers. You don't even have to come in with great questions. If you come in with an interest and maybe even a hunger or desire to get somewhere that you're not yet, and you don't really know how to get there, or maybe you want to get there faster or in some other way, then just bring that to a coach, and the layers of the onion can get peeled back. That's their job.
Mm-hmm.
That is the coach's
Mm-hmm.
deliverable to you, is to help you process that and figure those things out. So once you kind of kick things off in that way, you usually settle into some type of cadence of coaching sessions. For some people, they want to get together every single week. So others, every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, every 3 months. It just depends on the person, it depends on their goals, and depends on how much time they're willing and able to commit to the experience and process of being coached. So at that point, it kind of gets to the coach. It varies from person to person, but in many cases, you're going to see a pattern of the coach will hold you accountable, or at least provide space for accountability. That's another way to think of
Mm-hmm.
it. They're ultimately not trying to hold you to account. That is your job, but the coach is going to bring up to you anything you said you were going to do in the past session. They'll say, "Hey, Laura,
Mm-hmm.
last time we were together, you said you were going to do this by this day. How did it go?" Some coaches don't even say that. Some will just say, "So, Laura, update me on the things you were going to do." And that leaves squarely leaves the ownership in your camp as the coach, as the person being coached, to say, "Well, I wrote down what I said I'd do. This is what it was. This is how it went." And so usually there's a check-in of some kind. And then from there, you kind of create the session agenda together. It's usually the client that drives the topic. The coach is there to say, "What is most important for us to talk about today?" And then you're off to the races. And the session itself takes different shapes, different forms, depending on who you're working with. But usually at the end, you're going to recap some things. How did it go? What did you learn or take away from that time? And then there's almost always the question of, okay, well, based on our conversation, is there anything that you're going to do between now and the next time we get
Mm-hmm.
together? Or anything you want to just commit to out loud and trust that in a future session, I'll check in and ask how it went. And then it's a cycle. Some people go through seasons of coaching and then not coaching. Some people have steady coaching for years and years. It just depends on the person, what's most helpful, valuable to them, and that will vary by person.
Nice. I love that the process centers around action because we know that action brings clarity.
Mm,
So when you're wanting to work on a goal and gain clarity and gain momentum, that focus on action, I think, is so key. And I love that that's just
yeah.
the major focus. Okay. So if someone is interested in coaching and they want to see if coaching could potentially help them, what would the next steps look like?
There's probably two paths worth describing. The first would be if you have the financial resources at your disposal and you're the only decision maker, then finding a coach is almost a matter of Googling or asking your peers, "Hey, have you ever worked with a coach? Or have you ever worked with a person who does this?" And then it's almost an interview process. It's really valuable to talk to a couple of different coaches and try to feel out how did I jive, how did I vibe with this person? Did it feel like a good match? Would I look forward to talking with this person in some regular
Mm-hmm.
cadence? And can I afford what it costs to work with them? If you're the person making the purchasing decision, you can just go straight into that arena, and asking your peers can be a really fruitful way. But if none of them have really experienced this, that's okay. Just go into more of a general web search. And a nice place to start, you could look at the International Coaching Federation website. That's a accreditation body that there are thousands and thousands of coaches that you can find through that. There are other places as well, but finding a coach is actually pretty easy. It's just a matter of choosing that might get hard. If you don't have the financial resources or you're not the decision maker, then that means you're probably what some people call an individual contributor on a team somewhere. In that case, you should probably start by just mentioning it to your team leader, your manager. Hey, I'm interested in coaching. Is that anything that we offer in-house? Okay, if it's not, is that something that I have a budget for, that I can look for a coach? Or do you have a coach that you bring in when someone like me is interested in receiving executive coaching? And that is the kind of initial path to take. In some cases, if they've just never done that in the organization, well, you're probably going to have to go do some homework. It's then up to you to go do some research. What are the options? Are there some coaches out there that have worked in your field, in your industry? That is something that is not required, but it can be helpful to have a coach that does know your field in some capacity. So searching and then seeing if you have a budget for it is the way to go if you're kind of an individual contributor on a team. And then the biggest thing is deciding to do it. That's something that can slow people down. It can feel weird. It can feel almost unknown. And for that very reason, at Built on Purpose, when we do coaching and when we are talking to new prospective coach or clients, we actually will just coach them on a call almost as a demonstration to say, here's what you can expect. Now that you've experienced it, is this something that you think would be valuable and helpful to you? And a number of coaches do something kind of like that, particularly for people who've never received executive coaching before, and it might be harder to decide to finally jump in.
Right, which hopefully encourages people to realize that it's not wasting anyone's time or effort to take a shot and just see what it's like. We highly encourage that. Well, okay, thanks for joining us today. Erik, thanks for the conversation and answering some of those questions about executive coaching. We hope that you've learned something new. And if you'd like to know more about our coaching services here at Built on Purpose, please send us an email at coaching@builtonpurposehq.com. We'll see you next time.